21.2 Climate Zones. Now, objectives describe Earth's major climate zones and then explain how climate zones are characterized. So what are the characteristics of Earth's major climate zones? That's the general question. Key ideas here: Earth has a great diversity of climates. Scientists categorize Earth's many climates into climate zones. Now, Earth has a great diversity of climates. Scientists categorize these into zones named polar, dry, humid tropical, moist mid-latitude with mild winters, and moist mid-latitude with severe winters. Now, most climate zones are further divided into subclimates. Now, in mountainous regions, climates can vary greatly within a small area. So if we look at this chart, this breaks down the climate zone into its subclimates and then the description of those subclimates. So you're looking at areas like the polar, and I generally want you to get an idea of what those polar climate zones, some of the characteristics of those. So that could be broken down into tundra and ice cap. Those mean that they're very cold, dry temperatures year-round. The tundra could have a little cooler summer, but when we say cool, it's still very cold compared to other climates. So polar in general, always cold year-round, and dry, could possibly have a cool summer if it's a tundra. Now, dry has two different subclimates: desert and semi-arid. Again, desert, very extreme, hot enough for evaporation to exceed precipitation. That's why you don't have a lot of rain in these areas. Semi-arid is a little bit of a step up. This is Arizona. Not as dry as desert, but evaporation still exceeds precipitation, so you don't get a lot of precipitation throughout the course of a year or even longer during a drought. Now, humid tropical, tropical wet, and we have tropical wet and dry. Now, humid tropical overall hot, could be wet most of the year, or it could have a wet and dry season. So humid tropical again, we have that very hot most of the year, but the tropical wet and dry does have a dry season mixed in within the year. Now, next one is moist mid-latitude with mild winters. This is broken down into three different subclimates. Two of them are very similar: humid subtropical and marine west coast. This is definitely dealing with the different locations. Humid subtropical, hot, humid summers and mild winters, whereas marine west coast has mild and rainy pretty much all year. Then we have Mediterranean. This is specific to a location on the planet around the Mediterranean area. This is hot, dry summers and mild, rainy winters. Then we look at moist mid-latitudes with severe winters. We have two subclimates on this: humid continental and subarctic. Humid continental, warm summers and cold, snowy winters. Subarctic, short summers and long, cold, snowy winters. Then we have the highlands. There is no subclimate for highland. Highland is just generally a climate all within itself. This is temperature and precipitation vary greatly with latitude and elevation. So you'll see different highlands across the world, and we'll look at a map next. So here, this is color-coded, breaks down all the major climate zones and their subclimates. So you can see, based on their descriptions, you can start looking at where they're located compared to some of the climate controls that we talked about earlier in the previous section. So now I have a couple of questions here. First, what is the driest climate location in the world? Think about this and think about the climate controls that we talked about in the previous section. The Andes act as a moisture barrier, blocking the movement of the moist air from the east. If you look at it where it's at right here, the Andes Mountains create a barrier right here. So it lies within a global high pressure area. It is a cold desert with less than a half an inch of rain each year. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody lives there or nobody can survive there. What's happened is there is a place in Peru where a current moving up the coast brings cold Antarctic waters north, causing this thermal inversion that produces fog and clouds but no rain. So you'll have area in the Andes near Peru where that Peru current goes up and that fog and clouds are there, but again, in that area there's less than half an inch of rain a year. So what do people do? The locals place huge nets of very, very fine material up in the hills and in the mountains. And as that fog passes through and those clouds pass through those nets, that water condenses and collects on those little nets, and then a huge catch funneled down to a pipeline carries that water down to the villages. It's actually very intuitive, and it's a really cool little situation where they take their surroundings, they make the best of it, and they adapt, and they collect water that way in those very dry and cold regions. Okay, we're done with 21.2. Time to use those section questions at the end of each section to try to see if you understood what the major concepts were in 21.2 in every section from here on out.